found white fluid on my clothes and got it tested. The test revealed I have a fatal STD, so Hey Reddit, longtime lurker here, but this is my first time posting. Using a throwaway account for privacy reasons, as I prefer to keep this separate from my main account. I'm feeling really distraught right now and could really use some advice. I'm afraid my husband might leave me and I feel terrible about it. I made a mistake and I know I shouldn't have. I'm sorry for rambling. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand where I'm coming from. My name is Emily, I'm 29 years old, and my husband's name is Jack, who is 30. Jack and I met in college and hit it off right away. He was incredibly smart and would help me out with tutoring for free, explaining things I didn't understand. Our friendship quickly turned into a romantic relationship, and before I knew it, we were officially a couple. After dating for a few years, we got married a couple of years after graduating. We've been married for about 3 years now, and things were great at the beginning. Things were indeed great at the beginning. Jack had a well-paying job and took care of all the bills, just as we had agreed upon when we were dating. He had always been a traditional person, and this arrangement worked well for us. I was okay with it, and so I focused on taking care of the house while he handled the financial side of things. Even after graduating, I didn't pursue a job outside the home. I have never worked, which makes my current situation even more challenging. Jack continued to take care of all the bills, while I dedicated myself to managing the household. We didn't have children yet, as we had decided to wait until our mid-30s before starting a family. Jack was an amazing partner, loving and understanding. He valued communication highly, and our communication was always excellent. Despite the division of responsibilities where I took care of the house, Jack was always there to help. He enjoyed cooking and assisting with chores, and he ensured that things never felt overwhelming for me. Our partnership was balanced and supportive, and I was very grateful for his help and understanding in every aspect of our life together then. In every aspect of our relationship, Jack was an incredible partner. He not only took the time to plan special date nights and surprises for me, but he also went the extra mile by buying or picking flowers for me on his way back from work. Jack had a knack for remembering the things I loved and liked, and he would often surprise me with thoughtful gestures based on things I had mentioned in passing. However, despite all these wonderful qualities, the one area where we faced challenges was in our intimacy. Jack and I had different preferences when it came to sex. While I enjoyed sex rough with toys and a lot of craziness, Jack preferred a simpler and more straightforward style. This mismatch in our desires meant that I often found myself feeling unsatisfied anytime we had sex, despite our strong emotional connection and mutual respect for each other. This difference between us was a huge source of frustration for me. Having a high sex drive also made things even more complicated between us. I was often in the mood when my husband wasn't, and I tried suggesting using toys or getting a bit rougher during sex to spice things up. But he was always so gentle and cautious, worried about accidentally hurting me. His concern for my well-being was sweet, but it kind of killed the mood for me. I wanted more passion and roughness, but his hesitancy to be more assertive left me feeling unsatisfied and annoyed. It was tough trying to find a balance between what we both wanted in the bedroom. To be honest, our intimacy struggles were already very bad, and then my husband's work situation went from bad to worse. He got a big promotion that came with a huge pay raise, which I was thrilled about at first, but I didn't realize how crazy busy he would become. His workload doubled, and he was drowning in tasks, leaving him with little time or energy for anything else. Our love life and intimacy, which were already struggling, took an even bigger hit because of his hectic schedule. The limited time we had together was now mostly spent with him buried in work, and we became so disconnected and distant. Trying to juggle his demanding job and our relationship put a lot of strain on us. It was hard to find moments to just be together and enjoy each other's company. It was a tough period for us. I felt so dang lonely and ignored, All I wanted was some quality time with my husband, but it seemed like he was always buried in work and never able to catch a break. The guy I used to hang out with, laugh with, and share my days with was now MIA, and he was lost in a sea of emails, meetings, and deadlines. His absence left this big old hole in my heart, and the quiet house just made it feel even lonelier. I missed his jokes, his hugs, his presence, all of it slipping further away as his job took over our lives. I tried to be understanding, knowing how important his career was, but dang, it was hard feeling like I was on my own all the time. I knew he was busting his butt for us, but the emptiness of his constant absence just kept growing, making me feel more and more isolated. Our once amazing partnership was fading fast. I was never the popular kid, not back in school and not now. I've always been more of a quiet, keep-to-myself kind of person, which meant I never had a ton of friends. My husband was one of the few people I was really close to, my rock in a sea of loneliness. So when his work started eating up all his time, I felt like I was losing one of my closest allies. And that made me feel very lonely, and to be honest, the world suddenly felt a whole lot bigger and scarier. He knew how rough things were for me, how much I missed having him around. He'd apologize, promising that things would get better once he and his assistant got the hang of the workload. And I understood, I really did. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any easier to bear. In fact, it just made me feel more isolated and more resentful of the situation we found ourselves in. As time went by and days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, that resentment started to simmer beneath the surface. I tried to push it down, to remind myself that he was doing all this for us, for our future. But as the gap between us widened, that resentment grew stronger, and it turned into a quiet ache in my heart that refused to go away. I wanted to believe his promises that things would improve, that we'd find our way back to each other. But as the loneliness continued to weigh me down, that belief started to feel more like wishful thinking than a real possibility. And with each passing day, the subtle resentment I felt towards my husband grew. It was during that time that I met Mike. I was lonely and craving friendship, and I guess that was why I was so vulnerable and fell for him. We met online. The loneliness had gotten so bad that I would create fake profiles on dating apps and other social media platforms just to chat with people. At first, I did it for fun, to curb my loneliness and get some entertainment. I would lie and say I was single, chatting with them for a while before breaking things off for no reason. But Mike was different. He was the first guy I just couldn't break things off with. At first, I lied to him too and told him I was single. He was single as well, so we started talking, and I quickly fell for him. He was amazing, charismatic, funny, and he made me feel good, even though we hadn't met in person. Our conversations were a bright spot in my day, and I found myself looking forward to our chats more and more. When I realized I was falling in love with him, I panicked. The guilt of lying about my marital status was weighing heavily on me, so I decided to come clean. I confessed to Mike that I was married. I was fully expecting him to cut ties with me and tell me to never talk to him again. But shockingly, he said it was fine. He was surprised at first, but he soon brushed it off. He said we could still keep in touch because he quite loved our conversations and that we had a deep connection. That response was unexpected. Part of me was relieved that he didn't react negatively, but another part felt even more conflicted and confused. Despite the deception, our bond grew stronger. Mike became a constant presence in my life. I started feeling things for him that I hadn't felt in a long time, emotions that had been missing from my marriage. Mike and I started constantly chatting. It was crazy how quickly he became such an important and necessary part of my life. I found myself sharing more and more with him, things I had never told anyone. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the little things that made us who we were. He understood me in ways my husband never seemed to. It was like Mike saw the real me, the me I had buried under layers of loneliness and pretense. As our conversations deepened, I started confiding in Mike about my marriage. I told him everything, how my husband and I had grown distant, how the spark had faded, and how lonely I felt despite being in a relationship. Mike listened without judgment. His empathy and understanding pulled me even closer to him. Mike's presence filled the void that had been gnawing at me for so long. I changed my phone password, which was something I had never done before, just to keep our conversations private. It felt like a small rebellion, a way to protect this new part of my life that brought me so much joy. I became content with the distance between my husband and me. The loneliness that had once been so overwhelming was now a distant memory thanks to Mike. He became my confidant, my friend, and the person who made me feel alive again. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I had been missing in my marriage. My husband and I had settled into a routine. Our conversations were now more transactional than emotional. But with Mike, everything felt amazing and new. Mike made me feel heard and valued, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Our connection grew stronger, and I found myself daydreaming about him constantly. Every message, every call felt like a lifeline. I started looking forward to our chats more than anything else in my day. Even mundane moments became special when I shared them with Mike. I began to notice the huge difference between my interactions with Mike and those with my husband. Conversations with my husband felt boring. They were always filled with the logistics of daily life: bills, chores, and schedules. With Mike, it was different. It was the complete opposite. Mike was fun. As I grew more attached to Mike, the emotional distance between my husband and me widened. I no longer felt the need to bridge that gap. The effort seemed pointless when my emotional needs were being met elsewhere. I started spending even more time on my phone, Mike and I grew even closer, and soon we were meeting up in person. Things moved fast. Our first few meetings were innocent enough. Coffee at a local cafe, walks in the park, talking for hours. It felt like we were in our own little world. But that didn't last long. Within a few days, I invited him over while my husband wasn't home. At first, we just hung out, talking and enjoying each other's company. But the chemistry between us was undeniable, and before I knew it, we crossed a line I can never uncross. Mike was hard to resist, and I don't want to dwell on the details because I regret it all now. After cheating on my husband with Mike the first time, I felt a huge wave of guilt. The reality of what I had done hit me hard. I was ashamed, but at the same time, I made excuses. Loneliness had driven me to it, I told myself. If my husband had been paying more attention to me, I wouldn't have felt the need to seek comfort elsewhere. It was a weak excuse, but it was enough for me to justify my actions at the time. That was how Mike and I started our secret affair. It became a regular part of my life, something I both dreaded and eagerly anticipated. Each time I met Mike, the guilt would gnaw at me, but the loneliness would fade away, and what would replace it was the excitement and comfort he brought. My relationship with my husband continued to fall apart. The emotional distance between us grew wider, and our interactions became even more strained. I found myself making excuses to avoid spending time with him, choosing instead to be with Mike whenever I could. I was hooked on the way Mike made me feel. Made worse was the fact that Mike satisfied me in ways my husband never could. As I mentioned before, my husband and I had differences when it came to intimacy. I liked it rough, and he preferred the opposite. But Mike was just like me. He knew exactly how I liked it. He satisfied me completely, and I soon realized how much I had been missing. The physical connection we had was electric, and it was hard to ignore how good it felt. Meanwhile, my husband started noticing the distance between us. He wasn't happy about it and tried to bridge the gap. He started being home more, making an effort to spend time together and rekindle our relationship. He'd cook dinner, suggest date nights, and even tried to be more affectionate. But by then, I felt it was too late. Every attempt my husband made felt like a reminder of how disconnected we had become. I couldn't shake the feeling of resentment that had built up over time. When he tried to be intimate, it felt awkward and forced. The spark that Mike had reignited in me helped in showing me the dullness in my marriage. I started comparing every little thing. When my husband tried to initiate affection, all I could think about was how much more thrilling it was with Mike. The difference was clear. My husband's efforts, though he had good intentions, felt inadequate. I had already checked out emotionally, and his attempts to win me back felt like too little, too late. Even when my husband was home, my mind was often elsewhere, thinking about Mike, replaying our encounters, and eagerly waiting for the next meeting. I started to resent my husband for not being able to fulfill me in the way Mike did, even though deep down I knew it wasn't fair to blame him for my own actions. The gap between my husband and me only grew wider. His attempts to fix things seemed futile as I was already invested in my secret life with Mike. I avoided conversations with my husband. I didn't want to confront the reality of our failing marriage. The more effort he put in, the more I pulled away. I could literally see the pain in my husband's eyes as he tried to understand what was happening. He was confused and hurt by my coldness, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Of course, the guilt was always there, just lurking in the background. Every time I saw my husband, I felt a pang of remorse. He was clueless about the double life I was leading, and I hated myself for betraying him. But the pull of Mike was too strong, and I couldn't bring myself to end things. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I felt trapped in a cycle I couldn't break. Mike was like a refuge, a place where I could escape from the reality of my failing marriage. I started to see the cracks in my own justifications. Yes, I was lonely, but was that a reason to betray the vows I had taken? Each encounter with Mike left me questioning my choices, but I was too deep in the affair to find a way out. My marriage that was once the center of my world had become something else, and it was all my fault. Eventually, the weight of my actions began to take its toll. The guilt and the lies started to wear me down. I became paranoid. I was constantly worrying that my husband would find out. Every innocent question he asked felt like an accusation, and I lived in fear of the day my secret would be exposed. Despite the turmoil, I continued the affair with Mike because I was unable to let go of the connection we had. The affair had started as a way to fill the void in my life, but it had become something more complex and consuming. It was no longer just about loneliness, it was about how much I enjoyed it and how much I loved the thrill. Looking back, I see how misguided I was. The affair didn't solve my problems, it only created new ones. I regret the pain and betrayal I caused my husband, and I regret the lies I told myself to justify my actions. Mike and I's affair was a mistake, one that I will always carry with me and regret. Mike not only destroyed my marriage, but I ended up with an STD. I can now see how unfair I was to my husband. He was trying to save our marriage while I was already halfway out the door. I regret the choices I made and the pain I caused him. Mike might have fulfilled my physical desires, but the cost was a fractured marriage, an STD, and a trail of hurt that I will always regret. Well, the day I dreaded and feared finally came, and it was worse than I could have imagined. The day my husband kicked me out, I hadn't been expecting it at all. Mike was out of town for a few days, so we couldn't meet up, which meant it was just me that day. I texted with Mike for a bit and did house chores. A normal day in general, albeit a bit boring. However, when my husband came home, things took a drastic turn. First, I noticed he came home earlier than usual, and he looked furious. I didn't know whether to approach him or not, but he quickly made that decision for me. He stormed over to me and told me that I had 10 minutes to pack my things and get out of his house. I was stunned and confused. We hadn't had any arguments recently, and I had no idea he had found out about my affair. My mind started racing as I was trying to figure out what had triggered this sudden outburst. Then he explained how he found out. He had discovered white fluid on my clothes and became suspicious, so he had it tested. The results revealed I had an STD. Since he was clean and we hadn't been intimate in a long while, it was clear the only way I could have contracted an STD was through cheating, which I did. As he told me this, my heart sank. Immediately, I started crying, apologizing, and begging him not to kick me out. I asked him what STD I had, but he refused to tell me. The only thing he said was that it could be deadly and that he wanted me out because I was a cheating witch. I was in shock. I hadn't even expected that I had an STD, as I hadn't had any symptoms except for the white fluid. I had dismissed it as something normal, possibly related to ovulation since I don't track my periods closely. The reality of my situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband's anger, the STD, and the realization that my actions had led to this moment all crashed down on me at once. I scrambled to gather my belongings. My mind was racing with a mix of fear, regret, and disbelief. My husband just stood there, watching me with a look of pure disgust. I tried to reason with him to make him see that we could work things out, but he was resolute. He wanted me out of his life, and nothing I said could change that. In those frantic 10 minutes, I packed my stuff. My hands were shaking and my heart was pounding. I couldn't believe this was happening. The moment I stepped out of the house, my husband slammed the door behind me. I was left just standing there with nowhere to go and my world crumbling around me. I tried calling Mike, desperate for some support, but he didn't answer. I felt utterly alone and devastated. The weight of my actions finally hit me full force. I had betrayed my husband, contracted an STD, and now I was homeless. I reached out to a few friends for help, but most of them were reluctant to get involved. Eventually, one friend agreed to let me stay for a few days, but I know it isn't a long-term solution. My life has taken a drastic turn, and I have no one to blame but myself. That's why I turned to posting on Reddit. I'm looking for some solace and also would appreciate if I could get some advices on how to gain back my husband's trust and his forgiveness. I regret what I did and I just want to go back home. Update.
Hey, Reddit up.
Wow, I did not expect this kind of engagement when I posted my story. I was expecting a bit of interaction, but not like this. This post absolutely blew up and I've gotten tons of DMs and comments. There are so many that I haven't been able to go through them all. The ones I have read have been quite judgmental. Yes, I know I cheated and I know I was wrong, but please stop criticizing me. All the people in the comments and even the ones who messaged me are all criticizing me. A lot of you said I had some audacity to even be asking for advice on how to make things work when I cheated. Many of you said to just move on and let my husband go, but I can't do that. I love my husband and I want to make things work. A lot of you said to go get myself tested, and yes, I am no fool. I am currently in the process of doing that. The thing is, I don't have much money on my own. I am still staying with the friend who is letting me couch surf, and she's only letting me stay here for one more week. I've reached out to my family, but they are not in this state, which is why I couldn't go to them. My parents have promised to send me money for both a plane ticket and to go get myself tested so I know what STD I have. I'm really nervous and scared, to be honest, guys. I don't have much of an update yet as I'm still trying to reach out to my husband. I just wanted to answer some of the frequently asked questions and also address the hate I received in my first post. I really didn't expect it to be this intense. To answer a few of the most common questions. Why did I cheat? I was feeling incredibly lonely and disconnected in my marriage. I know it doesn't justify my actions, but that's the truth. I was looking for an escape and I found it in Mike. Have I been tested? Not yet. As I mentioned, I'm in the process of getting tested. My parents are helping me with the funds, and I should have an appointment soon. Do I regret it? Absolutely. I regret hurting my husband and breaking his trust. I regret putting my health at risk and jeopardizing my marriage. Why do I want to stay with my husband? Despite everything, I love him. I want to make amends and work things out. I know it's a long shot, but I have to try. To everyone telling me to move on and give up, I hear you, but I can't just walk away from my marriage without trying to fix it. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Looking back now, I realize how much I took my husband and our marriage for granted. My actions were selfish and reckless, and now I am paying the price. The affair with Mike, which had seemed like an escape from my loneliness, has led to my downfall. I regret everything, hurting my husband, risking my health, and losing the life I had built. As for the hate, I understand where it's coming from. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm facing the consequences. But I'm asking for your help, not your judgment. If you have constructive advice or support, I'd really appreciate it. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Thanks to those who have offered kind words and support. It means more than you know. Update. Hey Reddit, some of the questions you all ask me are so funny. Didn't you read my main post? Why am I getting questions like why I have no money? I literally said I was a stay-at-home wife and had no job, so how was I supposed to have money on my own? Anyway, I'm posting on here because I have an actual update now. I finally went to get myself tested. My family sent the money and I immediately booked an appointment. Well, I have chlamydia. Apparently, I've had it for a while now, months in fact. Mike gave me chlamydia. The doctor said that chlamydia often doesn't show symptoms, which is why I didn't detect it sooner. He said that discharge, however, is a symptom of chlamydia. He also said I should have been coming in for regular checkups, which would have helped detect it sooner. I should not have dismissed the whitish discharge I had. Thankfully, it's treatable, but it could have done some serious damage if I had just left it. It could have even led to infertility. Of course, a lot of you asked in my last post about my family's reaction to me cheating and if I had told them the truth. Yes, I did, and they were not happy. But they can't abandon me, so they sent me money. I know I'm still going to get a chewing out when I go back home, and I genuinely do not look forward to it. On the other hand, I messaged Mike the day my husband kicked me out looking for support and somewhere to stay, but Mike never got back to me, and now days after he has finally gotten back to me. It's weird that we haven't talked for so long. It's just some days, but it feels so long because we used to talk every day. It's also unusual for him to go offline for so long. I've told him that we should meet up, and he agreed, so we are going out for coffee in a few days. I will tell him about the chlamydia and advise him to get tested. I'll probably break things off with him after that because I still want to work things out with my husband, and I don't want anything to do with somebody who gave me chlamydia. Now that my husband has found out about us, it's as if the scales have fallen from my eyes, and Mike is just no longer appealing to me when I think about him. I know that sounds very stupid, but it's true. My husband and I also talked. Despite all my crying, pleading, and begging, he still does not want to forgive me and wants a divorce. He says he just cannot forgive me and has tried, but hasn't found a place in his heart to do so. I told him I was leaving the state and going back to my parents, hoping to trigger him or at least make him miss me, but it didn't work. He told me I could go as long as I came back. He found white fluid on my clothes and got it tested. So I guess that revealed I have a fatal STD, so I will probably find a job when I get back with my parents. This is my first time paying my bills. Using a throwaway account. I will have to stay with my parents for a while since I have no money or income of my own. I'm feeling really distraught right now and could really use some advice. Thanks for the support. I'm afraid my husband might leave me and I feel terrible. I'll keep you all updated. I made a mistake and I know I shouldn't. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I'm sorry for rambling. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand. It's been a few days since I last posted and a lot has happened. My name is Emily. I'm 29 years old. Remember I said I would update after meeting up with Mike, who is 30. Well, things went quite chaotic, to be honest. Hit it off right away. At a little cafe. He was incredibly smart. Mike apologized for not replying to my messages sooner, explaining things I didn't understand. He said he had been really busy. Our friendship quickly turned into a romantic relationship. He wanted me to clarify what happened and why I needed a place to stay. And before I knew it, we were officially my husband kicked me out. After dating for a few years, everything to married a couple of years. My husband found out about me cheating. We've been married for about 3 years. I had chlamydia, and things were great. He knew I had been unfaithful. Things were indeed great. Mike was shocked to hear that. Jack had a well-paying job and took care of all the chlamydia, just as he was the only one who could have given it to me. He had always been a traditional person and started blaming. This arrangement worked well for us. He screamed that I must have given it to him. I was okay with it, and so I focused on taking care of the house so much that I told him then and there that we were over. And I never even after graduating, I didn't pursue a job. I made it clear that I hadn't done anything. I've never worked, which makes my current situation. I wasn't even intimate with my own husband, so the only one who continued to take care of all the bills was him. While I dedicated myself to managing my household. It was a messy and
have children yet,
confrontation,
but
but
I'm
I'm
glad
glad
it's
it's our
over.
mid-30s before
I don't want anything to
family.
do with Mike anymore.
Jack was an amazing
So
partner,
yeah, just
loving
wanted
and
to update you
understanding.
guys.
He valued
I'll probably be
communication
leaving and
highly,
going back home in
and
a
our
few days.
communication was always
I'll also
excellent.
fill you in on what happens
Despite
after
the
that.
division of
Thanks
responsibilities,
for sticking
where I
with
took
me
care
through
of the
this.
house.
It's been
Jack
a
was
tough
always
ride,
there to
but
help.
I'm hoping things will get
He
better.
enjoyed
from here.
cooking and assisting with
Update.
chores, and he ensured that
It's
things
me
never
again,
felt
the chlamydia
overwhelming
girl,
for me.
as you all have dubbed me.
Our partnership
I don't even
was
know why I
balanced
keep
and supportive.
updating here when the comments
I
are
was very
horrible.
grateful
You guys
for
are
his
so
help
hateful
and
and
understanding
negative
in
towards
every
me.
aspect of our life
But
together.
well,
Then
I have an update
in
for
every
you guys
aspect
since
of
you
our
seem to enjoy
relationship,
those.
Jack was an incredible
I'm
partner.
back home now.
He not
I
only
landed
took the time
yesterday,
to plan
and I'm
special
so
date
angry
nights
because
and
it's barely
surprises
been a
for
day,
me,
and I'm already
but
getting
he
into
also went the
squabbles with
extra
my
mile
parents.
by buying or
They
picking
have been
flowers
blaming
for
me
me on his way
relentlessly.
back from work.
It's barely been a day.
Jack had a
and they
knack
keep
for
asking me
remembering
what
what
my
things
plan
I
is
loved
now
and
and how
liked.
I plan to win
And he
back
would
my
often
husband.
surprise me with thoughtful
I keep
gestures
telling them
based
that
on
my
things
husband
I've
refuses
mentioned
to
in
forgive
passing.
me, and that chapter
However,
is closed.
despite all
but they
these
refuse
wonderful
to
qualities,
listen.
the one area where
They
we
say that
faced
without my
challenges was
husband,
in
I
our
am nothing,
intimacy.
and that things will be extremely
Jack and
hard
I
for
had
me.
different preferences
They
when it
claim
came
they
to
have no
sex.
space in the house
While
to
I enjoyed
accommodate
sex
me
rough with
permanently,
toys and a lot of
and the only
craziness,
reason they even sent
Jack
me money
preferred
for
a
the
simpler
ticket
and
was
more
because they didn't
straightforward
want me
style.
couch surfing and being
This
homeless.
mismatch in our desires meant
They
that
keep
I often
insisting
found
I must
myself
make up
feeling
with my
unsatisfied
husband and go
anytime
back.
we had sex.
I keep trying to
Despite our
explain that I
strong
want my
emotional
husband back
connection
and
and
would go
mutual
back if he
respect
would
for each
forgive
other.
me. But he has
This difference
refused to
between us
and
was
doesn't
a
want
huge
me
source of
anymore.
frustration for me.
My parents also blame
Having
me
a
for
high sex
contracting
drive
chlamydia
also
and
made
saying
things
I'm even more
stupid for
complicated with
between
Mike,
us.
arguing that
I was
Mike
often
could
in
have
the
been
mood
my
when my
backup
husband
plan.
wasn't, and I
We
tried
ended up
suggesting
arguing
using
about that
toys
and
or
arguing
getting a bit
even
rougher
more because
during
my
sex to
siblings seemed
spice
to take
things
my
up.
parents' side. But he was always
That's why
so
I'm
gentle
making
and
this rant
cautious,
post
worried
now.
about accidentally hurting me.
I also realized something since
His
this whole
concern
thing
for my
went down,
well-being
my
was
father-in-law,
sweet,
my mother-in-law,
but it
my
kind of
husband's
killed the mood
siblings,
for
and
me.
his family in general.
I wanted more
Not a single
passion
one
and
of them has
roughness,
reached
but
out
his
to me.
hesitancy to be more
I
assertive
thought we were
left me
close
feeling
and then they liked
unsatisfied
me.
and annoyed. Wow, they must
It
not
was
have
tough
liked me
trying to
enough.
find a balance between
Not a
what
single
we
one
both
of them has
wanted in the
called or
bedroom.
texted to even know
To
what
be
happened
honest,
or hear my side
our
of the
intimacy
story.
struggles were already very
I'm
bad.
sure my
and then
husband must
husband
have talked
talked
to
to
them and they've
situation
taken
went
his
from
word
bad to
for it.
worse.
I'm sure they
He
must
got a
even
big
be the
promotion
ones
that
egging
came
him
with a
on to
huge
divorce
pay
me,
raise,
which I was thrilled
It's
about
just
at
so
first.
frustrating.
But I didn't
I know I
realize how
messed up,
crazy
but the
busy
way
everyone has
become.
turned on me is incredibly
His workload
painful.
doubled, and he was
I feel so
drowning in
isolated
tasks,
and judged by
leaving
everyone
him with
around
little
me.
time or energy for
I don't know what
anything
to do
else.
anymore.
Our
I
love
feel like
life
I've
and
lost
intimacy,
everything
which
and have
were
no
already
support.
struggling,
Took an even
Thanks for
bigger
listening
hit
to my
because of
rant.
his
I'll
hectic
update you guys
schedule.
again if anything
The
changes.
limited time we had together was now
Update.
mostly spent with him buried in work.
Wow, I didn't
And
know
we
you
became
guys
so
cared this much,
disconnected and
considering all
distant.
I've ever gotten on this
Trying to
app is
juggle
hate
his
and
demanding
criticism.
job and our
I'm so
relationship
shocked
put a
right
lot of
now.
strain on us. I logged in and
It
saw
was hard to
loads of
find
DMs
moments
and
to just
comments
be
asking
together
for
and enjoy
updates
each
and
other's
checking in
company.
on me. It was a tough
I know it's
period
been a
for
while
us.
since I last updated.
I felt
and
so
you all
dang
must have been
lonely and
surprised
ignored
since
since
I was
updating regularly.
All I wanted was some
and then
quality
suddenly
time
went
with my
silent for
husband,
months.
but it seemed like he was always buried
It's been a
in
long
work
while
and
since
never
my
able
last
to catch a
update
break.
because I realized that being
The
on
guy I
Reddit
used to
was
hang
really
out with,
affecting my
laugh
mental
with, and
health.
share my days with
I
was
decided
now
to step
MIA,
back
and
and
he was
focus
lost
on
in a sea
myself,
of
but I
emails,
wanted to give you
meetings, and
guys one
deadlines.
last update, which is
His
why I
absence
waited
left
until
this
after
big
the
old hole
divorce
in
to
my
come
heart,
back.
and the quiet house just made
So
it
I
feel
deleted
even
my
lonelier.
Reddit account for a while and
I
just
missed his
tried to
jokes,
focus
his
on
hugs,
myself.
his presence.
A lot
All
has
of it
happened
slipping
over these
further
past
away as
months,
his
so
job
let me
took
update
over
you on
our lives.
everything. I tried
First
to be
of all,
my
my
husband
husband
and
and I
knowing
have
how
officially
important his
gotten a
career
divorce
was,
since
but yes, he didn't
dang,
forgive me. It was hard
he
feeling
divorced
like
me.
I was on my own all the
My
time.
parents tried everything.
I knew he
He
even
was
tried
busting his
intervening
butt
and
for us,
talking to
but
my
the
husband,
emptiness
but
of
he
his
still wouldn't
constant
budge.
absence just kept
He
growing.
said he could not forgive
making
a
me
cheater,
feel
so
more and
yes,
more
we got a
isolated.
divorce, and it was brutal. Our once amazing
In my
partnership
state,
was
both
fading
spouses
fast.
don't have to be present
I was
to get a
never the
divorce.
popular kid.
One
Not back
spouse
in
can
school
file
and
for
not
it alone.
now. I've always
Despite
been
this,
more
I
of a
insisted
quiet,
on
keep
being
to
present in
myself
court
kind of
person,
person, which meant I never had a
well,
ton of
brutal
friends.
for me.
I already knew I
was
wasn't
one of
really
the few
getting
people
much
I've
since I
cheated,
cheated,
which is
a
a big deal in
my
my
rock
state,
in a
but
sea of
knowing
loneliness.
something and having it in mind.
So when his
is
work
quite
started
different
eating
from
up all his
actually
time, I
witnessing
felt
it.
like I was losing one
Like
of
I
my
said, I knew
closest
I wouldn't get
allies.
much since I cheated,
And that made
but
me
I was
feel
still
very
quite
lonely.
shocked.
And to be honest, the
I
world
didn't get
suddenly
anything.
felt a whole
Nothing.
lot bigger and
Nada.
scarier.
Zilch.
He knew how rough
This
things were
infuriated
for me,
my
how much I
parents,
missed
and they
having
even
him
said they
around.
would sue, but of course
He'd
I didn't let
apologize,
them do that
promising
because
that
it would
things
just
would
be
get
stupid.
better once he and his assistant
After
got
the
the
divorce
hang
was
of the workload.
finalized, I went back
And I
permanently to
understood,
stay
I
with
really
my
did.
parents.
But
I'm still with
understanding
them,
didn't make the
and they keep
loneliness
threatening
any
to
easier
kick
to
me
bear.
out soon.
In fact,
But
it
I know
just
they
made me
won't
feel
because
more
they really
isolated
love
and
having
more
someone they
resentful
can
of the
rant to.
situation we found
That
ourselves
doesn't mean
in.
I want to stay with them.
As time
I
went
still
by
want to get
and
a
days
job,
turned
make
into
my own
weeks
money, and
leave,
leave into months.
But I now
That
realize that
resentment
the
started
job
to
market is
simmer
really
beneath the
tough.
surface.
I don't have any
I tried to
experience
push
in
it
my
down
field as I've never
to
worked,
remind
so
myself
jobs
that
are
he
hard
was
to
doing
come
all
by.
this for us,
All the
for
ones
our
I keep
future.
seeing are minimum wage
But
jobs.
as the gap between us
My
widened,
parents
that
say to
resentment
accept them
grew
first
stronger,
until I gain better
and it turned into a
opportunities.
quiet ache in
But
my
I don't
heart
know.
that refused to go away.
Other than that, life has been
I
pretty
wanted to
slow and
believe his
stupid.
promises that
I'm
things
dealing
would
with some
improve,
mental health issues.
that we'd find our
I
way
would
back
like to see a
each other.
therapist, but my parents don't
But as the
believe in
loneliness
therapy and
continued
won't
to
pay
weigh me
for it.
down,
So I have
that
to wait
belief
until I
started
get
to
a
feel
job
more
before I
like
can get
wishful
therapy.
thinking than a real
I
possibility.
wanted to stay in communication
And with each
my
passing
ex-husband,
day,
but
the
he
subtle
didn't want
resentment
to,
I felt towards
and
my
has blocked
husband
me since
grew.
the divorce. It was during
He
that
says
time
there's
that I
nothing
met
that
Mike.
connects us anymore.
I was lonely and
My
craving
husband's
friendship.
family didn't reach
And
out
I
to
guess
me
that
either,
was
so
why I
I'm
was
not
so
in contact
vulnerable
with
and
them.
fell for him.
As for Mike, we
We
haven't
met
talked
online
since that day.
The
That's pretty
loneliness had
much
gotten
it.
so bad that
Thanks
I
for
would create
reading,
fake
despite the fact
profiles
that
on
you
dating
guys were
apps
so
and other
negative and
social media
hateful, and thanks
platforms
to the few
just
positive
to chat
ones.
with people.